Welcome, everybody, to this week's episode of Nerdflix and Chill, brought to you by WeTheNerdy.com. I'm Gary Theroux. Over there is a guy who's wondering if it counts as cyberbullying if you just emotionally abuse your computer software. It's Sean Capri, everybody.
I feel like I need to cyber abuse myself. I did not sleep well last night, Gary. I'm going to be right up front with this. I done fucked up. I did something bad after this is not the first time that we're going to run through this little show of ours. And I messed up big time. I feel awful about it. Our show is late because of it. But I hope ultimately it's for the best. But I need to get this out of the way to apologize to everybody. Our show is late. I dropped the ball, Gary. I dropped both my balls.
Well, I will say on behalf of everyone, apology accepted. Let's move on. I blame Skynet, as I said. So we'll hopefully technology will be on our side from this point forward. Even if you call it a Nancy boy and make it eat dinner after you and all your siblings are done dinner. If your computer gets mistreated for a long time because of this, I understand.
I'm gonna throw buckets of lotion at my computer and tell it to put it on its skin, I think.
Yeah, and then every time your computer does something good and looks to you for approval, you're just going to sort of nod. But then if your iPhone does something really good, you're going to make a big show out of praising it.
Yeah, either that or I was kind of going along the buffalo. I'll just tuck my junk in between my legs and just do something weird in front of the computer. But not on camera.
Me? I'd fuck me.
Oh. Nope.
Gross. All right, well.
Off to a great start.
We are off to a great start. We're so happy to have you guys back with us. We appreciate all you guys listening. We only keep growing, and we are still growing. We find this out every week because you guys are the best fans, and you tell people that you know these guys who are doing a podcast, and it's good, and you should listen. And that's all we got. We're still waiting for our Crazy Bill's auto wash station sponsorship money to come through. So we have nothing but you guys, and we very, very much appreciate it.
It makes me all warm and fuzzy inside, although I should probably get that checked out one of these days.
One of these days. Doctors are important. Mm-hmm. We're not supposed to be Christian scientists here.
I'm not sure if I believe in Western medicine, though.
All right, well, we got to start, as we usually do, with trailer talk, but before we do, we have to pay off the Rotten Tomatoes game movies that have already been released. So we like to talk about the trailers that we see in the theaters before our new movie. And in this case, we went and saw The Accountant, and I think that's one of the movies that is going to pay off this week in our Rotten Tomatoes game predictions, scoring, thing, system. Go, Sean.
That's a really great name. I'm glad we were finally able to lock down a nice branded name, make it consistent so people, it's familiar every time. So I'm glad that you were able to do that for us, just totally off the
Clean
top.
And concise. That's what we do.
I like it. Yeah, exactly. We don't do things twice over. Clean, concise, and done twice. The Accountant came out last week, and we guessed our scores based on a really stylish trailer. It was very neat. It had a cool soundtrack, a good look to it. I was wowed by it. You, Gary, not so much. And one of us was really right this week. So I guessed 80 on The Accountant. You guessed a 42. Rotten Tomatoes score is 50. Right down the middle.
It's a good day for your boy over here. More dominant. Forward positive momentum in the Rotten Tomatoes game for October. So with that being the only entry we're covering this week, what is the scoring looking like for the month of October? Because I think we'll have one or two movies that'll pay off next week. Mm-hmm. The Ouija board movie Ouija. And Jack Reacher : Never Go Back. We should have some payoffs. So where are we standing going into those two?
You are killing it. I don't even want to give away the actual number of a lead that you have right now, but you are so often within 10 you're single digits away from these things. So fantastic. Very impressive. So
I'm the Cleveland Indians of this series, and you are the Toronto Blue Jays?
I don't understand sports ball, but I did actually. I understand enough to know that was two different. I like that. That was a good one. That was a good one, Gary. I don't have any diet, or I guess I have some leftover diet soda from our last recording where we did this yesterday. I normally have a beverage here, but that's all right. We'll move on. I'm looking forward to seeing how Ouija does. We also, like you said, Jack Reacher and Inferno is
Inferno. We're gonna get triple payoff.
Yeah, we're gonna have a big week. Is that enough?
Go October.
I don't think actually. Inferno is actually going to work. It'll be the following week for that one.
It'll be the following week. So I think we don't count that as October. We count the dates as of when we are recording. So you'll have to make up some ground this next week with the board game movie and the Tommy C movie. So with that being said, we should talk about the trailers we saw before The Accountant this week. We got 4 new trailers that have been sort of briefly discussed, including in some of the shows that were so ably covered for me by Thane. The first of the 4 previews that we saw before The Accountant that we're going to guess the scores for future installments is Assassin's Creed, which is based on the super popular video game starring one of my favorites, Michael Fassbender, and in a very visually interesting and stylish, hip trailer. It's got like a Kanye West song that I guess some people think is cool. I'm
not a god, even though I'm the hand of God's hand.
Yeah, I love when he rhymes God with God. You totally understand his fame.
Definitely. That's a pure talent right there.
Absolutely. So,
bunch of white dudes.
I don't know if I'm placing a bunch of faith in Michael Fassbender alone to prop up this movie. I can't say that I know anything about the series, about Assassin's Creed as a game.
Mediocre.
So plot-wise, I get what they give you in the trailer, which is that he is going to get transported back to the Spanish Inquisition and jump off some really high shit. But I've got some generally positive ideas of what's going to happen here. I want to see it. I'm interested. They got me. I will say see this movie, but I don't know how much that'll be reflected in my score. I might have to hedge a bit.
I'm definitely hedging. I think I can really base this on the fact that I think that the games are mediocre and at best game movies are bad. So I don't really know unless this has some sort of miracle magic behind it. This has got to land somewhere in the 50s for me. So I'm gonna go. So I don't know if anybody knows. Like this, the premise is really what I think is gonna break some people. So the idea of Assassin's Creed is that it's sometime in the future, and you hook up to this thing called the Animus, which inserts you into the memories of your ancestors, and then you run around as if it's real life, like a virtual reality, like the holodeck from Star Trek. Somebody will correct me on that. So the premise is weird. So in a game, you kind of like look past some of these things, but in a movie, I think audiences might not respond too well to that. So that all adds up to a big fat 51 for me on the Rotten Tomatoes predictions game thingy that we do on here on the Nerdflix and Chill podcast segment.
Again, love that title. Yeah, we're not going to get a lot of separation. We're not going to get a lot of separation on December 21st when this movie comes out. I say 53. I think we're both a little weary of like you say, the history of video game movies. I'm troubled by The Rock's Doom movie and Jake Gyllenhaal's Prince of Persia movie.
Freddie Prinze, Wing Commander.
Again, a classic, as we all know. So
it's in my
if I could
VHS
check the Rotten
collection.
Tomato. Yeah, exactly. If I could check the Rotten Tomato scores for those, that would help here. But we're both hedging our bets and cutting it right down the middle. 51 for you and 53 for me.
That might even be high, man. Like, that's the thing. Like, that might even be... We may be 30 off on that. Like, who knows?
Yeah, exactly. So we won't get much separation in the game, but did you say see it or skip it? You want to see it, though, at least. You're curious?
I'm very curious. It's definitely a see it. So, I mean, and that's the thing about some of these movies. They have so much clout behind them. There's so much... I don't know, je ne sais quoi around this movie that people end up seeing it and funding it, and then it fools the studios into thinking that it was a good idea, and then we get more. So I'm part of the problem, Gary, and I apologize ahead of time.
Well, I'll be right there with you.
Ooh, Christmas date.
Propping up the box office for a movie that we have no idea whether it's going to be good or not. We're not going to wait for reviews. We're probably going to go see this.
Can we go dressed up as assassins dressed as Santa Claus? I think that would be fun.
I would like to do what I saw someone dressed up at a Harry Potter opening night movie about 15 years ago, 10, 15 years ago. We waited in line on a Thursday night to go see a midnight showing of a Harry Potter movie. Can't remember which one. And someone showed up as Optimus Prime. If we're going to dress up, I want to go off-brand completely. I don't want it to have anything to do with Assassin's Creed.
I love it. Well, what about Magneto? We'll go at least like one step away. We can always go dress up as Magneto.
So, moving it forward, we're going to a completely different type of genre here. Didn't really fit the theme of the movie we're about to see or the preview we just saw. It's for what I think is going to be an Oscar bait movie called Lion, starring Dev Patel of Slumdog Millionaire fame. And it's a true story, a heartwarming tale, a tearjerker about a boy who found himself separated from his family by happenstance, at a very young age, he obviously got raised by what you would assume is a well-to-do white family. You got a very haggard-looking Nicole Kidman playing the mother. And as a grown man, as Dev Patel, that boy in the future, seeks to reconnect with his past and find out his family. And we're going to get an inspirational tale with soaring music and international visuals, which is definitely not a thing. And I don't know how much they're going to succeed in their Oscar baiting here. I think this type of movie is generally well accepted because it sort of goes down easy. But I'm curious. I will say see it based on the trailer. There's nothing disqualifying here. They gave away a large chunk of the plot, but this kind of all is about, when you watch these movies, they're kind of all about whether or not they can grab you emotionally and pay you off with an ending you kind of know is going to kill you one way or the other.
Yeah.
If he fails at the end of this, it's going to tear you apart. If he finds his family at the end, you're probably going to be crying and sobbing just as much. The question is, will you care by the time you're 90 minutes or 2 hours into a movie like this? And I choose to give the filmmakers credit based on cutting together a pretty nice trailer and liking the work of Dev Patel historically.
Right. I am on the opposite end of this. So I think you're right. I think the critics are going to love this. I think it is going to be a bit of an Oscar darling, some Oscar bait. I thought you were shaking your head, but you're just like massaging the mic with your beard. I hope that comes through on the show. Where the hell was I going with this? So you talked about like maybe hopefully by the end of the 2-hour show that you'll care about some of the characters enough to have some sort of reaction. I didn't care enough about anything that's happening in this movie from the trailer at all. So for me personally, this is a skip it. But my score isn't going to reflect that at all. I think this is going to find an audience, particularly with critics. I think they're going to love this. Maybe I was just expecting the kid to get run over by the train at the beginning of the trailer, and I thought that we were in for a real tragic tale, but instead he's just lost. He seems fine, Gary.
Everything worked out for
Everything
him.
is okay. You didn't get hit. It's all relative. You got up from that train track and everything was great. Or was that your brother? I was lost a little bit. I don't know who is who in this. So this all adds up into a palindrome. 77 on my Rotten Tomatoes.
Gotta love those two-digit palindromes.
Two-digit palindromes.
Math wizard. So we're also not going to get a lot of separation here. I'm saying 71. I think the critics will like it maybe more than the fans. But I think this is me just playing it safe, thinking more in terms of gameplay than in terms of
No, I got you beat on this one.
trying to nail the prediction exactly, because this is really tough to get a read. I never saw. Did you see The Good Lie, a movie that came out, a true story that came out with Reese Witherspoon a couple years ago?
No.
Tonally, this kind of feels the same as that, right? Where people separated from their homes, and then we're gonna make them feel at home again, and these tearjerker movies really hard to read for me. So 77 for you, 71 for me. We'll see how that shakes out on November 25th when Lion comes out. So the next trailer we saw moving along is the next directorial writing and starring vehicle for Ben Affleck. Of Accountant fame. And Mr. Affleck has got his new movie coming out on January 13th.
Yep.
It's a period piece, a gangster story about a man who is struggling with his own morality after coming back from a war, as is mentioned in the overdub.
Yep.
It's got some beautiful visuals and
Cool
some great shots. Very stylized as well. And I will say that my rating, most of my positivity for this, I have to admit, is coming from his history.
Yep.
It's coming from my love of Argo and the Town and Gone Baby Gone. I think we just saw that The Accountant got 50 from critics on Rotten Tomatoes, but I think he's going to get even a little bonus bump for people appreciating his return to form after Batman and the Accountant. Something that he wrote and directed. He's got a great track record, and I think that's going to come through in the score. So I'm going to definitely say see it and probably go pretty high on my score.
Yeah, this is a tough one for me because I don't know what it is about this trailer. Maybe it is the time period. It seems like a challenging thing to tackle, and this is going to sound so contradictory, but like I just don't know if Ben Affleck is going to pull this off, even though I don't really have any reason to think that. Like his track record is impeccable. So, but this for some reason just feels like a little outside of the things that he's done before. And even that is contradicting because Argo was outside of kind of the town and those things. So I'm not really sure why, but something here has me worried. Pulling back a little bit on it. This is definitely a see it for me, because I would see Ben Affleck as the shark in Jaws. I think, especially if he directs it and writes it, then even better. But I don't know. There's something here that it's throwing me off. Maybe it's similar movies in this same time period. So I think I'm going to go on the Rotten Tomatoes guessing game prediction, Nerdflix and Chill segment game with 75, Gerald.
Wow, here's a chance for someone to make up some points, because we got some separation here. I'm saying 88.
I'm worried.
I think this movie is going to be excellent. I have a huge Ben boner, and hopefully this does nothing to stifle it. I can just keep it strapped down under the belt and continue to watch him build a really exciting and diverse career. Like you said, it is a new type of story for him as a director. And at a certain point, you have to respect the batting average. He's 3 for 3, making incredible dramas.
I feel like I'm going to end up looking like Krusty betting against betting for the Generals. I thought the Generals were due. You bet against the Harlem Globetrotters. That's how I feel right now. That's how this will probably play out. But I just want you to have some victories in your life. No, I can't even say that. That was mean. That was not. No, that was no. I'm just bad at this game. We'll just leave it at that.
Immediately.
It was. I don't know why I say things. Everybody should try podcasting, because it's amazing when you just say things and then it goes into the microphone and into the computer, and then you put it out onto the internet and everybody reads. Gary, get me out of here.
Well, we've only got one more movie, and then we'll talk about The Accountant itself. We'll give you our spoiler-free review of that. The last preview is for a movie coming out on December 16th, starring Will Smith and Helen Mirren and Keira Knightley and Michael Pena and others. And it's called Collateral Beauty, which for me is just an absolutely awful title.
Terrible.
But it looks like we're getting emotional, broken man Will Smith again. We're getting a story where Will Smith has a family tragedy. The trailer tells us that his son has passed away, and it has taken all of the joy out of his life. And in his grief, he has started writing letters, not to people, but to things. In this case, specifically love, death, and time. And, of course, for the purposes of this script, those things get personified in the form of Helen Mirren and Keira Knightley and others. And he speaks to them and tries to come out the other side of his grief in a very inspirational tale about loss and love and death and time, as it were. So I don't know. This is my favorite type of Will Smith. He has done these types of movies in the past, 7 Pounds and Pursuit of Happiness, where he's trying to hit a specific note that is outside of his charming and likable self or standard that we think of him as. And I am going to say skip it. I don't think this movie is going to work. That's just based on a 2-minute trailer, but I think that's going to be reflected in my score, that's for sure.
I am on the other side of this. I really like broken, beaten, sad Will Smith. I think he's very powerful and poignant in his performances. And I think instead of maybe what the problem with this trailer is what they should have done is show that scene from The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air where it's a big internet rumor where he's talking about his dad and leaving him, why didn't he want him? And then Uncle Phil gives him a big hug and it makes everybody cry. They should have just done that.
Tore my heart out.
And they should have just put the letters on the top and the bottom that just says, think like this, except he's mad at love and death and that sort of thing. So they could have, it's basically that just 25 years later, if that makes any sense at all. I'm also curious as to how many people will begin to write to things. Apparently in the movie they say, or in the trailer they say that this is what people do often, but I wonder if we see a little uptrend on writing to death and love and all of these sorts of things. Maybe the post office will see a nice little boost in sales because of Will Smith's little, and you're not digging this at all.
So no, so long as I agree with it, yes, they should do that. And just remember to send those letters to the North Pole, care of Santa Claus, OXO, XOX.
Gotcha. Okay, so we're clearly we're definitely going to get some separation here. This thing is loaded up with Oscar winners already. So I'm going to...
Just not Michael Pena.
Not Michael Pena. Just a reminder, everybody has an Oscar or at least a nom, except for Michael Pena. But maybe he'll get it in this. He's been working hard, Gary. And And after last year's whitewashed Oscars, who knows? We might be in for some What am I even talking about? My score on the Rotten Tomatoes guessing game prediction Nerdflix and Chill segment with Gary and Sean Capri, 77.
And we are definitely going to make or break the month of December on this, I think. Because with your 77 and my 34, there's a chance for someone to get real fucked on this one.
I'm getting bang on, Gary.
Oh, gotta love that -5 deduction to try and put you ahead. So
I can't wait.
That'll get us a lot of content. 4 trailers in one show. It'll give us a lot of content for future episodes to change the scores on the game. I'm looking forward to that. But now we have to move on and keep chugging forward to our spoiler-free review of the movie we went and saw this week, which is, as we've mentioned multiple times, Ben Affleck's The Accountant. It's also starring Anna Kendrick and J.K. Simmons and others. It's directed by Gavin O'Connor, who's probably most known for movie lovers for Pride and Glory and the 2011 MMA movie Warrior. The movie here is, for me, a fairly uneven, sort of wishy-washy 2 hours that I ultimately found very entertaining. A good performance by Ben Affleck and other good performances that we're going to talk about throughout. Mm-hmm. But this story is the story of Ben Affleck's titular accountant character, mm-hmm. who's a math savant with more of an affinity for numbers than for people. Mm-hmm. And he works at a sort of a small-town CPA office, but he's also a freelance accountant for super dangerous people. And we find out early on that he's skilled in hand-to-hand combat and weaponry, and he might be sort of a poor man's Jason Bourne. Mm-hmm. And that plays out throughout a movie that, I find really fun to watch minute by minute. I'm enjoying myself, but sort of in retrospect, when you give these plot points and the directorial style thought later on, maybe you come away with more questions than answers, even though I know a big thing for you is so many answers at the end of this movie.
Too many answers. So, I wasn't asking those questions.
I am ultimately coming away with a very positive feeling. I like this movie very much, but definitely a lot to say about it. So what were your initial thoughts?
Yeah, I'm split right down the middle because I think as a movie and just as like a fan of movies, I was very entertained. There was lots to laugh at, lots of fist pumping moments, tons of headshots, and that really just kind of got me. I was not expecting it to be as violent, but I think is it possible to be classy but violent? Really great kind of headshots right in the forehead. A lot of double taps, as it were.
Boom, headshot.
So I really liked the action in this. I liked Ben Affleck. But yeah, there was some odd choices. He plays an accountant, as you said, with a dangerous kind of past and a troubled past. And he's dealt with some of the most dangerous people ever. But the story that we follow here, and this isn't really a spoiler, he wants to go in the straight and narrow just to kind of throw the authorities off. So he's not always working with terrible, terrible people. So he takes something that's a little less risky. And I just thought that was kind of interesting. That I'm not sure that made for the most intriguing storyline here. Like maybe one of those other jobs that he did before would have been more interesting. So that was kind of like one of my bigger issues with it. And then the other thing, without spoiling, is this movie goes way out of its way to answer questions that you didn't really want the answers to. And my best comparison to that is the Star Wars prequels, where we didn't really need to know like the logistics of Darth Vader becoming Darth Vader. We knew that he became Darth Vader. We didn't need that C-3PO and R2-D2 were just there. Like, super convenient, but kind of nods to the audience that I don't think really work. So for me, this movie was fun to watch, but if you look at it with a critical eye, you're going to have, I think, quite a few problems with it.
Yeah, it's just, for me, I think, like I say, I enjoyed Ben Affleck.
Yeah.
I really, really enjoy Anna Kendrick always, and I enjoyed her in this. Mm-hmm. But her characterization, her sort of charming, cute, dorky, almost uncomfortable way of interacting with people that I think a lot of people find winning, sort of didn't really fit in this movie, mm-hmm. I thought. J.K. Simmons, who I think is, for me, entering the Michael Fassbender, Kate Winslet infallibility level for me, mm-hmm. With the work he's been putting in recently, including Whiplash and Juno a few years ago and stuff. He's just so excellent all the time. He's excellent in this, but his sort of law enforcement character who's involved in the case and the search for Ben Affleck's accountant character. His motivation is kind of on shaky ground. It's odd. It's maybe out of place and unnecessary in some people's eyes.
Totally unnecessary in my eyes. These eyes.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a twist with another character in the movie that we won't spoil that is insanely obvious, where other things were well hidden and sort of more subtly foreshadowed. There's just inconsistencies here, and I think this is coming off as a list for me because I'm trying to think critically of all the things that other people might bring up when they go see this movie and come up with wildly divergent opinions on it. But I want to get those out of the way and say I had a great time at the theater. I enjoyed every minute, and when I got it, I thought that was great. But why do I feel so insecure in my review of really, really enjoying this movie? And I think those are the reasons why.
Yeah, there's a lot of unique qualities to this movie. I like the idea of the dichotomy of having somebody who should be very to themselves, very shy. Usually when you think of accountants, you do think of pocket protectors and just wimpy, nerdy kind of people. No offense to any of you accountants out there, but I mean, come on. My brother. So I like that. I like that he's a very unassuming type of person who's superpowered. It is like the Liam Neeson Taken character of the father with a special set of skills. So when he does start to fight, you're just kind of like, holy shit, he is messing these mofos up. And I love that kind of stuff. But yeah, ultimately, the reason that he's doing it isn't very good, and there's just way too many. I feel like there's an overcompensation of, I don't know, maybe feeling, I don't want to say inadequate or unintelligent or something, but there's too many connections that just didn't have to be made. So that's kind of where I'm at with it. I liked J.K. Simmons, as you mentioned. He has a bit of a protege in this, and her story is unnecessary. She fills a role that didn't really need the backstory that it got, mainly because it didn't really. It basically
didn't add anything to the.
It served for her to be encourage her to achieve her goal, but that just if it was just her job, she would have been motivated to do that anyways. But there's over the top, do this or else kind of thing, and it was just unnecessary.
Yeah, and I think the word that I keeps popping into my head is muddled, right? So they go to painstaking lengths to describe to you the nature of Ben Affleck's affliction, his autism or Asperger's spectrum, and how that's going to affect his behavior. He uses the word in a quip, in a joke, uses the word incongruous, and I just thought it's a great way to describe this acting performance, because he does a bunch of things that after they set up this premise so thoroughly of his affliction, he sort of counteracts that, and there are incongruities with some of the other things he does later on when you're introducing other characters and he's interacting with other people. I don't know if his syndrome is responsible for or just runs parallel with what you would think of as his sociopathy when he has to get into these intense, violent situations. Just very, very odd. But like you say, you mentioned the Taken character. Obviously, Jason Bourne's going to get called to mind.
Right.
And like I say, my description was just, so he's just special needs Jason Bourne now. And we'll see who makes the better series. If future Jason Bournes, if they're going to keep going, or if this is going to get franchised, because it got to 50% from critics, but it got 86% from fans, and a lot of people like me really enjoyed their time at the theater.
And it's dominating at the box office, too. It's doing really well, making a lot of money. So who knows? We could see this grow into a franchise or an expanded universe where we have the accountant and his buddy who has cerebral palsy, because you got to be careful of that palsy punch, Gary. It just comes up out of nowhere.
I just got a tricked out superhero short bus, and they just come in like the Avengers. Oh, it's gonna be the greatest series ever.
This does sort of feel like a superhero movie, just with no capes or anything like that. But it seems like they're launching this expanded universe where all these characters have a backstory and origin story, and that's not necessary here. So I feel like I'm repeating myself there. Ultimately, I had a great time. I am rambling on about the negatives here, but so much fun. Ben Affleck is spectacular in everything that he touches. He may be a little uneven, but I don't really blame that so much on him as I do. I think the script, I think the writing wasn't as good as it probably could have been. Maybe too many hands on it. I'm not really sure. But which kind of speaks to your comment about it being muddled. But I love me some Ben Affleck. He did not disappoint. I mean, just jacked, looking great. Anna Kendrick and him have a weird thing kind of going on. They have a few connecting moments. So I didn't really hate that interaction as much, I don't think, as you did. But this is a absolute see it, but check your brain at the door, and totally fine for a first. If we don't ever get a sequel for this movie, I'm actually okay with that. But because I feel like I'm now saying things that I like about this movie that were actually negatives for Jason Bourne earlier this year. So I just want to be mindful of that. Lots of fun, original story, a few flaws. So for me, that all adds up to a 3 out of 5, Gary.
Well, I think that's totally understandable. Like I said, I think there's going to be people, no pun intended, all around the spectrum on this movie. And for me, I'm going to say, because he's on the spectrum. We're talking a movie about autism.
Oh.
But for me, I will say 4 out of 5. Go see this movie. It's great. Form your own opinions. It's flawed, but ultimately excellent. And I'm really glad that we got to go see it this week. And along with that theme, speaking of things I'm really glad we got to go see, the next thing we're going to do is talk about this week's 6 Degrees of Chill movie. And for those of you who don't know, 6 Degrees of Chill is our segment where we talk about a movie either from our DVD collection or from Netflix or on a on-demand service if you want to demand to watch the movie. And we talk about the movie from beginning to end. We spoil the details of it, the twists, the endings. We hope you've watched along with us, but if not, hopefully our discussion will spur you to try this one out. We're going to talk about every aspect of the movie, and these get suggested to us by you, the fans. And it's got to be connected by an actor or an actress or a director, or if you're Corey Giltner, by some tangential staff member on the movie and Howard the Duck. But suggest what you will and get randomized and make suggestions for next week. And so why don't you talk about this week's entry, The Truman Show, Sean?
Yeah, connected to Bill and Ted from last week, good Lord. So The Truman Show came out June 5th, 1998, directed by Peter Weir. Gary, you remember Dead Poets Society and Master and Commander is such a good movie. It reminds me of like HD DVD days. Such a good times. Starring Jim Carrey, Ed Harris, Laura Linney, Noah Emmerich, and Natasha McElhoney, whatever you like. A modest budget on this, $60 million, and it grossed $240 million, which I think just every time we look at these Jim Carrey movies, and I don't know, we haven't really seen a whole lot from Jim Carrey lately, but what a monster and what a magnet this guy was to just put butts in seats. And it didn't really matter what he was in, from Ace Ventura all the way through The Mask to something a little bit more serious like this. I think you were saying, too, before recording, that this was the first serious movies that he did. So huge pull for a movie like this. Couple of Oscar nominations as well. Ed Harris, I think a clear nomination. I would love to see what he was up against that he did not win. Really compelling character here with Christoph. Oscar nominated again for the director, also for writing and screenplay, Andrew Niccol, who also did probably the best Nicolas Cage movie, Lord of War. Yeah. So that is it. I really like this movie. Gary, what did you think of this movie?
Initial impressions, we like to get our ratings out of the way so you know where we're coming from in the context of our spoiler-filled discussion of these movies. I really, really, really enjoyed this movie. After rewatching it, I enjoyed it again, beginning to end, and yet there was something, and we'll discuss what that might be, holding me back from really, really going over the top and putting in the pantheon of some of the best of the late 90s, early 2000s. I'm giving it a 4 out of 5. Mm-hmm. I had a great time. I think Carrey's performance is great, along with a couple other ones. And I just think that so much of the value of this movie comes from the conversations that it starts, which I think makes it such a perfect movie for this segment and for us to sort of break down and dissect as we sort of go through what we just saw.
Yeah, I can't really do the math from 2016 to 1998, but this movie is a little old, a little long in the tooth, but it holds up so well because the themes in this movie are universal and they're timeless. Jim Carrey's performance is excellent. There are a couple of flaws in this movie. There's a couple convenient sort of choices that move the plot along, which I definitely have a problem with. I don't love Laura Linney in this, but then again, I don't really like her in a whole lot. But there was just this movie, I don't know, it struck a chord with me. It really just kind of conjured up something from within, and just, it makes me think, it makes me feel something, and that will always drive my scores up, I guess, in a way. It makes me enjoy movies that much more when they're able to just get a little something going in me, make me think about it, make me sweat a little bit, maybe. Or so I really love this movie. I'm going a little higher than you on a 4.5. So I don't know, is there anybody in the world, Gary, who hasn't seen the Truman Show, who like doesn't know what this is about? Really?
I'm not sure. I can't imagine. I mean, we're talking about a movie that is universally liked, which is reflected in both our scores. If you count the two of us as universal, and you should take these scores as gospel. 94% from critics, 88% from fans. And for those of you who haven't watched it and are curious what we're talking about, or use us as a recommendation source, I mean, we're talking about a movie where Jim Carrey plays a character named Truman Burbank, was born and conceived and immediately injected into a fake world. It's a dome, we find out that it is, and everyone around him is actors, and they're fake, and we watch him grow up and live to now the age of 30 with a ridiculously terrible actor who's been doing this for many years as a wife. I'm not talking about Laura Linney. I'm talking about the character she plays and how horrible she is at reading commercial ads. He's got a best friend. He's got a father who died in a tragedy. He's got Charlie Sheen's mom from 2.5 Men. There's a whole world here built around him, and this is sort of a precursor to reality TV. You had said that it came out like maybe right before Survivor started airing.
Yeah, like a year
and I
before.
think that's right. Yeah, and it just like you say, more than what's actually on the screen in terms of what you want to talk about in this movie. You want to talk about, like you said, what this movie makes you feel and makes you think about. What would you do in this situation? Would you be able to sort of cope the way he does when the reveals come at the end of the movie? I made notes here, and the big thing that jumped out at me was like the way they sort of showed him start to understand what's happening. The clues were just all so obvious to me that I got frustrated as I was watching it. Like, how did that not tear it all down right at that moment? It just, there's a lot to unpack here, and ultimately, while I really enjoyed it, there's just those little flaws that I want to talk about. So what did you think about that part of it? So at the beginning of the movie, you've got the lighting rig falling off the dome, and then they fix that with the radio report in the car, and then you get the spotlight of rain that's inconsistent with the fuller dump of rain that's got to come, like they mistimed it. Those type of things. Did you have thoughts on those as well?
So I do, and I think the rational or average person, everybody who lives in the real world, would think, like, why doesn't that set you off immediately? But this is a character who is born, as you mentioned, he's born into this totally manufactured life and experience, and so he is born out of complacency. It's now kind of ingrained into who he is, of just kind of turning the other way and accepting things for the way that they are, as unbelievable as they are. And it's only unbelievable because we know what real life is like. And so he's a 30-year-old guy who's been living in this world that's been made for him. But maybe it's not really until he starts to really want to get out of it and break out of his shell and go explore the world and do something else. He's almost having like a really early midlife crisis. And it's not until that happens that it's almost like the wool gets pulled from over his eyes and he starts to see what's really happening. So for those reasons, I forgive it, but it does seem, I guess, in a way convenient for all of these things to, like, for the world to just fall apart all of a sudden, that things are going fine up until this point, and all of a, like you said, the set is falling apart, and there's incomplete elevators and whatever it is that.
Yeah, like why you think he's never going to go into the elevator in the bank building? Like, you built this elaborate dome, and yet you've got these backstage areas.
Pretty
like,
unbelievable.
That strikes me so odd.
Pretty unbelievable, but I mean, and one of the reasons that I forgive it for that, aside from kind of what I just mentioned, is that this movie does such a really great job, and I give really the credit to Peter Weir for immediately and with very little effort kind of establishing the universe that we're living in here, the environment and the landscape, that this is a TV show. This is something that everybody in the entire world watches. It takes a small town to operate it, to film it. There's 5,000 cameras. There's a giant obsession around this movie. There's a giant fandom across the world. And just with just a couple of shots, we understand the enormity of this, and how people from everywhere are tuning in to watch Truman. And I just really appreciate that side of it. And maybe you get a little scared about how easy it would be to pull off. Like, you just kind of grab a baby and throw it into a giant play, a couple cameras around, and you're kind of like, oh man, am I living in? And this is the things that make you start to think about, like, am I being recorded right now? Even, is this podcast being recorded twice? Am I being recorded in my vehicle when I'm driving around, or when I think I'm alone? Are people watching? And I think that introspective look of how do I act when I think nobody is looking is super interesting, and I love that about this movie.
Well, interesting and intimate, right? Like, you've got pictures of him in the mirror getting ready in the morning. Yep. And how many people would like the world to see the things you say or the way you act? And if maybe you've got imperfections, like neither of us obviously have a problem with what we see in the mirror when we step out of the shower, but maybe some normies, right? The common folk who listen to this show would have issues with what they see. And like, how would you feel about that, right? Of knowing that they were around for your first kiss, and every horrible decision you make, and every time you've ever been mean or ugly, which doesn't really get addressed in this movie. He's so sweet and pure, and there's more world to explore here. And like you say, they did a great job of establishing that world and the confines of it, the way it works with the advertisements built in, both the way his wife and his best friend do reads, and really obvious stuff like that, and the customers who come and put them up against a new ad billboard every single morning. And you're in the outside world, like you say, you got all these people watching who feel like they're part of the Truman experience. You've got the guy who watches TV in his tub for some reason. You've got elderly lesbian Stadler and Waldorf for some reason watching together. There's just the world that they establish here. You could mine this for a mini series so easily for hours and hours and hours. I think you could do hours and hours of backstory just on Noah Emmerich's character, a really great performance in this as his best friend, right? He plays Marlon, Jim Carrey's best friend, and just how does that world work? Jim Carrey makes mention at a certain point of how he was gone from school one time when they were kids for a month, and it's like, was that his like vacation time as an actor, right? Does he sleep
I never thought of
in his house in the dome, or does he get to go outside? Does he get medical care from the hospital there that doesn't have any doctors in it, or does he have to leave the dome
That's a problem.
to get medical
That's a bit of a problem.
Like, this world is so interesting.
Well, and I give director Peter Weir a lot of credit here, because this movie could have gotten out of hand very quickly. There are backstories left, right, and center. There have to be. The entire world is built on backstories and everybody fulfilling their role that they're playing here. So this really could have got out of hand, and it's really demonstrated with the way that Truman's character is developed here, in that he's an innocent guy. He's a kind of a klutz, just kind of, he's not really hateful. He's just a super positive guy. And I think that had they made him a more complex character, or any of the characters more complex, then this movie would sort of implode upon itself. But instead we get a collection of caricatures almost. And I always think that that's a fine balance, because it can come across as overly simplistic or unintelligent. But instead here we get just a nice reflection on some very universal themes by putting different characters that maybe we see a little bit of ourselves in Noah Emmerich's character, or Truman's character, or the wife. So I like it for that. There's a lot of restraint here. Could have gotten out of hand. And the other thing that I would say is that the path that Truman is on here, where he wants to end up with Sylvia, and I think we need to get to her. So why am I?
Yeah, we do.
Why am I messing up her name? But he ends up with a woman he doesn't really have an eye for first. He just sort of settles for her, and she ends up getting forced upon him by the script here. And I think that that's a really interesting thing, to have the entire world watch what happens when he wants somebody else, and then ends up with this Laura Linney character. And I wanted to ask you, like, do you think that she is at all heartbroken by the fact that, like, she obviously knows because she can watch footage, he is not in love with her. And like, I don't know if there's anything that I'm missing out of this movie is kind of exploring that. I wonder how her character would react. Is she just such an actor that she doesn't really care, or is she trying to fool herself? Because I think Noah Emmerich's character I think he genuinely cares for Truman here.
Yeah, well, you could definitely, like I say, you could mine a lot of material out of Noah Emmerich's character, because that's a huge question. He seems to show a lot more connection with Truman because they've been best friends and they were small kids. Mm-hmm. He's been doing this job ostensibly for 25 years or more. And he seems to have, obviously he's going to listen to Christof and his bosses and the directors, but he seems to have a genuine interest in Truman and his well-being. Mm-hmm. Whereas you're right, Laura Linney's character seems more distant and more of keeping it professional or whatever. She's got her fingers crossed in the wedding picture. And I don't think she's emotionally... If she doesn't love him back... Yeah. Is she really going to be hurt that he doesn't love her either? And it's funny because I say the word, maybe she's keeping it at a professional distance, when her character is clearly such an awful actress. Her reads are so tacky and obvious. Yeah. And I think that's part of the subtle humor of this movie. I just think about, like, her reads being so tacky. We talked about the signage in the travel agency when he's trying to book tickets to Fiji with the lightning bolt through a plane saying it could happen to you, and the other poster saying don't travel because terrorists and street gangs and all the theft and all the stuff that could happen to you.
Pre 9/11, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. And
do you think
her manipulation of him fits with the world's manipulation of him? Yeah. Same with the Christof writing the death of the father backstory to keep him out from trying the extent of the island and leaving there. All the speeches that Noah Emmerich gives him about this being the greatest place on earth.
Yeah.
And they put it on the newspaper. So Laura Linney, while she may not, as you've asked, have any deep-seated feelings for him, she thinks of it more as a job. She is deeply affecting of his world in that she is one of his many wranglers in a sense. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he definitely, well, they need to guide him along a certain script, so they have people, and logically so, you have a wife that calls the shots, so I don't know, maybe he's just accepting of that. I wonder, and I like that you don't really get a lot of that totally spelled out for you. You don't really know if Noah Emmerich's character was written in as the best friend or if that just happened. It does feel a little bit more natural, and I appreciate that wasn't completely spelled out for us. But what did you think about kind of this Sylvia portion of the story as it kind of was introduced?
I think there are people who could think that him buying women's fashions magazines and trying to create a fabricated picture of the woman who he swooned over as a younger man would be a little bit Buffalo Bill-ish, like you mentioned earlier.
Very creepy, yeah.
Super creepy. I think that's why it was important that he had to be such a virtuous and innocent character.
Good point.
He's so lovable that you accept it from him, and it comes off less creepy and more adoring, which I think you need a delicate touch as a director and as an actor to pull that off. I think I love Natasha McElhone. I've loved her for a long time. I think she's gorgeous, and I think that's relevant here because I think she was so perfectly cast.
Definitely.
She's got this almost sounds condescending. Well, yeah, she got terrific eyes and expressive eyes and stuff, but I think this is going to sound condescending, but she's like a wholesome kind of beautiful that is just appropriate for Truman. It makes him seem less lustful or like he's cheating on Laura Linney in the way that you sort of feel like his love is true and he's not going over after some tart in a red dress with huge cleavage and the heavy makeup, right? They could have cast this character wrong so many ways by putting a tart in there, and they didn't do that. And I think that's really important that you got such a classy, gorgeous woman to play this role of a woman whose intentions are pure and who feels real feelings for Truman, and that's how I took it anyways. How about you?
Yeah, definitely. They had like a bit of a forbidden love kind of introduction to each other where they're glancing at each other from across the room, but they're with other dates as they went out to the party. And then they did end up with each other. And I love the way that they're kind of, they weren't supposed, like they knew the way that the relationship is introduced is congruous. It kind of works with just, it's not supposed to happen. Like they're being ripped apart, but they want to get together. And little does he know that she has a truth for him that she tries to explain. And then this is what I really loved about the movie and the universe that they set up. Just as she is telling him and trying to unveil what is happening, as unbelievable as it is, her quote-unquote father rolls up on the beach and grabs her and puts her in the car and explains that she's schizophrenic. And a lot of guys have heard this before. And I just think like that's a clever way of writing that off. And I think a lot of guys might just maybe they like it was too good to be true. It was too good to be true that this gorgeous woman wanted to meet me and wanted to run off to the beach and hang out. Turns out, yeah, of course she was crazy. So I like that explanation worked for me. But ultimately, there was something about her that stuck with her, and he wanted to recreate that moment that he had with her for the rest of his life.
Yeah, and I think that scene where the actor shows up and explains away her behavior is sort of a really, really great look into the manipulation, the level of manipulation going on around Truman, and specifically from the next person I want to talk about, which is Ed Harris's Kristoff character. So I don't know why he needs to have a backwards Kangol and terrible glasses and a single name like Moby. Maybe that was just a time in the 1998 thing. But maybe he's a high-minded artist, and that's supposed to come through in the characterization, not just his behavior. But he's the one ostensibly who comes up with that plan. You find out later he's in control of anything, so you got to assume he's the one who figured this out and came up with this explanation and sent the actor out there to pick her up with this backstory. And you mentioned Oscar nominated. I didn't love Harris's performance. I don't know if it's because he was good and I very much didn't like his character, or because I didn't quite understand some of his behavior, especially in the climax, right? So when Truman finally has enough and breaks and goes out to sea, and then Kristoff, they turn on the sun and the jig is up for sure.
Yep.
They have this real suspenseful scene where Ed Harris and Paul Giamatti are controlling the weather, and Paul Giamatti is feeling like this is getting dangerous and we can't take this too far. And Kristoff, who thinks of himself as a father figure and as a godlike figure and has this, he would claim, love for Truman, is sort of engaging in attempted murder in 1 minute, and then the next minute telling him how they need each other and he shouldn't go and he should continue this relationship with what he now knows as a voice in the sky. Like it seemed odd and stilted to me.
It's a panicked reaction, which is what I really appreciate about it. And Ed Harris's character Kristoff is conflicted between, I know you said the jig is up, but I think at this point he still kind of wants to keep Truman within this world because he knows this is where he will be safe. But at the same time, in order to do that, he needs to put him in extreme danger by pulling crazy weather on him. It's almost like a police officer who, in order to enforce the law, needs to murder a few people or needs to speed, which is equivalent. So it's interesting, and I think that he is just not sure how exactly to handle this. It's like when your world and everything that you've worked for and obsessed over for the last 30 years is in jeopardy. I think that it makes sense for the reaction to be kind of irrational, because it's hard to really imagine what any of us would do because it's such an extraordinary situation. So I feel like a bit of an apologist for this movie, just kind of maybe giving it a little bit of leeway there, but I definitely appreciated Ed Harris's portrayal of that inner conflict of trying to be like a parent and wanting him to be safe within the world that he's created, but also be dedicated to the show and maintaining that the Truman Show continue on. So keeping him within the dome, but ultimately Truman's persistence kind of pays off, and he finds out the truth by running into the end of the dome. Probably my biggest issue with this movie is that it's blue sky. It's painted blue sky, so I don't know how that ever changes. Like, that ultimately is the background. I don't really know how that works, Gary. I don't know if you noticed that as well. Like, it's kind of got blue but like white painted clouds on it. So does the sky always look the same?
Suspension of disbelief. They can obviously control actual weather. They show clouds forming.
Mm-hmm.
They show real weather.
Mm-hmm.
So is that maybe just a band of horizon on the dome below the artificial weather system? It's just
I don't mean to make a big deal about it.
There's a bunch of suspension of disbelief here, including Jim Carrey's ignorance at the beginning of the movie with not having the clues. Because we find out in flashback that there have been extras that have tried to tell him before. People have come in skydiving. How does that happen in a dome? Extras have run up to him and tried to tell him the truth, popping out of a birthday cake. Like, there are clues here as to what's going on, and you just sort of have to go along for the ride. But I think it works. I think that, like you said, Peter Weir, a real deft touch, a real great job of putting together a great story. And I feel like most of the positivity for this movie comes not from a specific scene or memory of like, oh yeah, I remember when this happened, but the whole experience of this movie and sort of Truman's character and Truman's world, which was handled so well. So I very much enjoyed it. I think it's a perfect movie for this type of discussion.
Yep.
And I would hope that a bunch of the people who listen to this show would have watched it as well and would have discussions of their own, because you might want to talk about, like, what would you do if you were in Truman's shoes, or talk about, like, this from Ed Harris's perspective. Is this a parable about, like, letting your children go? If you were a parent of a teenager and you watch this, is this a parable about, like, letting your children spread their wings and venture out on their own? Is it a parable if you're a young person or a person who's sort of in a rut personally with your job or your life or your relationships or whatever it is?
Touched on that.
Yes. Yeah. Is this a story about breaking free and chasing your dreams against all obstacles, man-made or otherwise, like Truman did? Like, there's so much here. We could have had this discussion 6 different ways. We didn't talk at all about filmmaking, and we don't do a ton of that in 6 Degrees of Chill, but you could watch this with a critical eye and talk about some really interesting musical choices in this movie. You talked about some of the shots early on in the world, establishing the world with what are clearly spy cams with some fades around the edges and some angles that are very, very odd. There's a lot to unpack here. It's just such a perfect movie for the segment.
Yep.
And I'm so glad it got suggested and picked last week.
Big time. I feel like I could have touched on about 6 different things. I think we'll wrap it there. Oh, this is what I want to ask you. Elon Musk is coming out and saying that there's reason to believe that we're all within a simulation right now. So I wonder, like, what would it take for, like, how strongly would you hold on to the notion that you believed your entire life that this is real, that everything you know is real? Like, what would it take for that to be broken for you? I feel like it would actually take more than you think for your brain to accept that this isn't real life.
You may be right. I would say that I'm maybe more of a slave to logic than that, and I would say...
Whose logic, though, Gary? The logic has been built for you. It's so deep. It's whoa, Gary.
Whoa.
So I pose the question more of as a thought for you to not sleep tonight than anything.
All right.
And for everybody else to go, do I take the red pill or the blue pill? Man, this connects to last week again. Holy crap, 360. Amazing.
So, yes, we can let that idea hang and say that we had a great time watching this movie and we're glad it got picked. So with that, we need to pick next week's 6 Degree of Chill movie, and we had, again, such a fantastic week for submissions. Sean's going to mention a bunch of the movies that got suggested and a lot of the people who contributed either by text or on Twitter or via Facebook, youtube.com/WeTheNerdy. If you're watching online, you can comment on there. Just so happy to have you guys. You guys are so amazing, and we keep growing, and it's just so exciting to be a part of. And I want to thank you all. And Sean, what do we got for next week's 6 Degrees of Chill?
We had myriad of selections. I don't even know how to count this. You guys are amazing. We had so many suggestions from people like Josh Stapleton and Danielle Texera, future Mrs. Fody. It's amazing. Chris O'Neill, Tony Paul's, like a bunch of newcomers to this. I love it. Nathan on Twitter at voiced by Nathan. Thank you so much. Holy crap, I'm missing people here. Sean Fedunik, Blair, of course. And just a great collection. A few movies that had a really great chance at making the cut. Apollo 13 had a number of votes here. Howard the Duck had one shot. Didn't make it. Sorry, guys.
Your time is coming, Corey.
Oh, man. We're just going to have to keep doing this, I guess. That'll be what the little carrot that dangles in front of us as we continue on. Some of my other favorites, I like Mystic River a lot. Super 8, Eternal Sunshine had a really great chance. I was surprised that Planet of the Apes didn't make it on here as a connection from Paul Giamatti. It's obviously my favorite Paul Giamatti movie and appearance. But let's get down to brass tacks, Gary. The winner of this week's 6 Degrees of Chill is none other than Josh Stapleton and his suggestion of The Firm, connected by Ed Harris. So we're in for a Tommy C movie. Tom Cruise.
Snap. Classic Tom Cruise based on a John Grisham novel.
Of course.
I like courtroom dramas, although I don't think there's a ton of courtroom action in The Firm.
Mm-hmm.
I've watched it, I think maybe a little over a year ago was the last time I watched it. But really excited to watch Tom Cruise. Especially, I think this is pre-dental surgery Tom Cruise when he still has 3 front teeth, which is my favorite. My favorite Tom Cruise is 3 front teeth Tom Cruise.
I love that that's a thing. The internet is so amazing. Just like, no, even if you didn't know that, just Google that real quick and it'll blow your mind that you didn't realize
Tom Cruise
before.
has 3 front teeth.
Yeah.
I love if people Google that. So nice work, Josh.
Amazing.
And I'm pumped to watch some Tommy C. And it looks like we may get doubled up here because we also have to pick a new movie to watch next week, and we only have a couple options. Those being the Ouija board movie. Yeah, if you want to go see, if you've ever wanted to watch a thriller about board games, you can watch the Ouija board movie, or you can watch Jack Reacher: Never Go Back, which is of course another installment in a series that required no sequel because I don't think anybody particularly loved Jack Reacher #1.
Nope.
You can come at me on Twitter if you want.
Nobody wanted this, Gary.
For that one. And then the comedy, the new Zach Galifianakis and Gal Gadot and John Hamm comedy, Keeping Up with the Joneses. So what do you think we should watch?
I'm tempted by Gal Gadot, and as much as I like board game movies, I think that there is really only one answer here, and it's my boy, Tommy C. This has got to be a 100% Tom Cruise episode of Nerdflix and Chill. As much as I did not like the first Jack Reacher, as much as I am completely fed up with watching these commercials and watching him punch through a car window holding a salt shaker, it'll work. It'll do, Gary.
It's probably going to win. It's probably going to win the box office. It's probably going to be the thing that most people go see. And also, it gives us the opportunity, like you said, to have an all Tom Cruise themed episode.
Let's do it.
So with that, why don't we go all in on Tom Cruise for next week's Tom Cruise themed episode? We'll watch Jack Reacher: Never Go Back. We'll watch The Firm, and let's bring back NFC lists. You guys can tweet at Sean Capri, at me at Gary T Movies, at the website We the Nerdy has a Twitter handle as well. Tweet us your lists. Let's do top 5 Tommy C movies. Let's get your lists on the air. We'll talk about some of your guys' lists on the show next week. Yep. We'll both come out with our own, and then we'll watch 2 entries, and maybe we'll get a bunch of 6 Degrees of Chill entries, and we'll stay on Tom Cruise the week after. If people for 1 week maybe suggest more Tom Cruise movies, it's just going to be all Tommy C next week. I couldn't be more pumped.
It's going to be amazing. And if you guys have some trouble on Twitter, I always recommend, because there's a character limit, you can open up the notepad, list them there, take a screenshot, and send that over to us. That's probably a really great way. And then we'll also celebrate it next week on youtube.com/WeTheNerdy. Gary, let's get out of here.
Absolutely. So I just want to say to everybody once again, thank you so much for supporting the show and continuing to tell your friends. Like I say, get a hold of us on Twitter. Can't wait to talk to you guys on Facebook some more. youtube.com/WeTheNerdy. Don't forget to go check out the site proper, WeTheNerdy.com. Continually expanding. We got new staffers this week coming in to create more content. So much stuff going on. Sean's other podcasts put up by WeTheNerdy.com.
Yep.
Just go check it out, and thank you again so much for your support. Thanks for sticking around for this week's late episode, and we'll talk to you next week.
Okay, love you. Don't crash on me.